Preaching politics, that's what more than 1,000 pastors plan to do next month to fight for their freedom of speech.
The opponent, the Internal Revenue Service, pictured screen right, and its controversial tax code that prohibits tax-exempt organizations like churches and pastors from engaging in political discussions. So is that unconstitutional, or is the IRS silencing our pastors' freedom of speech?
Here with some legal insight, Fox News senior judicial analyst Andrew Napolitano. Judge, does this concern you?
Well, it does concern me. It's an age-old problem, Brian. The basic principle of law is if you want this tax exemption, meaning the people that contribute money to you do not have to pay taxes on the contribution, and the money that your group, whether it's the Archdiocese of New York or a very small independent freestanding church, receives, is not subject to taxation. Are you willing to sacrifice freedom of speech in return for that privilege? And the freedom of speech, the limitations on it are pretty precise. Full-time clergy employed by a full-time legitimate church that receives this exemption cannot, in an official capacity, advocate for or against specific legislation or for or against specific candidates. So Cardinal Dolan could have a conversation saying, I think you should vote for so-and-so for president. But he can't say it from the pulpit.
Well, that's interesting because it's happening all the time, isn't it?
Well, it is happening all the time. As Brian noted in the introduction, and as we were talking in the break, there are 1,000 pastors in the United States of America who in 2 weeks on a Sunday are going to challenge this. Question, will the IRS come after them? Well, the last time this happened, very famously, was not more than a few blocks from here, St. Patrick's Cathedral. John Cardinal O'Connor in 1984, Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush against Walter Mondale and Geraldine Ferraro. The late, great Geraldine Ferraro, who we all knew, a practicing Roman Catholic who favored abortion. Cardinal O'Connor said, no Roman Catholic can vote for Mondale Ferraro, and he said it from the pulpit. Did the IRS come after him? Of course not.
Of course not. Right now, as you know, the Catholic Church is mounting probably a good way to describe it would be an educational campaign where they're every week or two they're talking about the contraceptive mandate where Catholic organizations have got to provide birth control, which flies in the face of what the Catholic Church stands for. So rather than saying, you know, maybe you should vote for the other guy because this is Barack Obama's policy, they're just saying, we're against this. You've got to connect the dots.
That's very interesting. This is already the law. So the tax-exempt speech prohibition does not interfere with your ability to criticize the law.
Right.
It interferes with your ability to advocate for legislation. So you didn't hear anything from Cardinal Dolan. I'll continue to use him as an example. When this legislation was making its way through Congress, you only hear his outrage once it's the law. That's perfectly lawful for him to blast this from the pulpit.
I bet a lot of preachers don't even know about this IRS law. It's very interesting. I love this topic. Here's some other questionable activity. Media Matters, in coordination with the Department of Justice, we've talked about that. They're a tax-exempt organization, and whether or not they should be allowed to continue in that status, right, Judge? Because they're not being bipartisan. Media
Matters has the exact same tax exemption as all the religious groups do, and so theoretically the same prohibition. What do they get away with? They collaborate with the Department of Justice to attack people like the four of us and our colleagues here.
There you go. All right, Judge.
He says that with a chuckle.
Well, because we're in good company.
Of course.
We are indeed.